We had a conclusion to the Hunter Biden long-running investigation. I think some people are misunderstanding what this is a conclusion to. This is a conclusion to his investigation on tax charges, a conclusion to his investigation around illegal firearm purchase. Man, he's lived an exemplary life. And it is not a conclusion to any investigation surrounding potential corruption with Burisma and everything like House Oversight is talking about.
Yeah, different branch of government. Mm-hmm. But I will say the problem for the House is that the people who actually bring criminal charges is not that branch of government.
Correct.
So they have that little issue. So 3 charges today unveiled, 2 misdemeanor tax evasion charges, 1 felony gun charge as purchasing a weapon by someone who is addicted to controlled substances. On the 2 tax evasion charges, he's pleading guilty and getting probation. And on the felony gun possession charge, he actually is agreeing to a pre-detention. It will actually act like probation in terms of what he will be expected to do. But if you fulfill all the requirements of it, the case is dismissed. So unlike in the tax evasion charges, which will stay on his record, technically speaking, for those who live under a rock, in theory, it won't be on his record that there was a felony gun charge.
And now the
felony
question,
gun conviction.
The question everybody's asking is this a sweetheart deal? Is this a gift to Hunter Biden? And it's a really good question for which I don't fully know the answer to, because the question isn't in the abstract, is it a sweetheart deal to not give someone criminal time, only put someone on probation for those charges, but concretely, how are similarly situated people treated? So if you're a first offense, nonviolent tax felon who's paid back the tax debt, do you normally go to prison? That is something I do not have the stats on that immediately available. Or if you have lied on your purchase form for purchasing a gun, and again, it's all of these are first time offenses rolled into one claim or rolled into one case. Does jail time normally pertain then? And those are the questions I think that are worth asking that I don't see as many people asking, say, on Twitter. Not that I'm on it very much, just to be clear, but it is not the question I'm seeing a lot of people asking. But that is really the key question if you're wanting to talk about sweetheart deals. How do other people tend to be treated under similar charges?
Well, there's another side to the sweetheart deal problem.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, look, first of all, DOJ, I love y'all, but come on with the timing here. You had 3 years, 4 years, 4 years, almost 5 years to do something with this. And like June, really 1 week, 2 weeks later, you had to, okay, fine. So look, it's being compared to the Donald Trump stuff. There's one big difference. Hunter Biden was willing to talk about a plea negotiation and Donald Trump wasn't. I wish, and I think it would be very politically savvy of the Department of Justice to come out and say what plea deal, in theory, they would be willing to talk about with Donald Trump. They're not going to do that. That would be so outside of what the Department of Justice ever talks about publicly. But for instance, if the Department of Justice said, look, if he wanted to come to the table, we'd drop all the willful retention charges. He would plead guilty to the obstruction, false statements, lying charges, 32 through 37, and we'd offer probation on all of those. Honestly, that would be a really smart thing to do right now, in my view. Now, you may disagree on whether they should drop the willful retention on, what's what, but fine. Like, forget the details for a second. But Donald Trump would reject that. He's not pleading guilty to anything. And so in that sense, you can't really compare them. But you have folks on the right saying, and I think understandably so, here's this guy pleading to these crimes that are real crimes, tax evasion, gun possession, and getting nothing. And Donald Trump has document crimes. And I used air quotes for those not in the room because I think that kind of misses the point. Like lots of things are document crimes and they're pretty bad. If I write down, go kill that person, it's a document crime.
And the other dynamic is the plea deal looks like a compromise, like a concession. The indictment of Trump looks like Thor's hammer. And if you think that's an unusual thing in American justice system, welcome to the American justice system, because what often ends up happening is the indictments are Thor's hammer, and they're designed to frighten people into plea deals. They're designed to sort of show, here is the worst case parade of horribles that can happen to you if you don't come to us and cut a deal, and the deal's going to look a lot better than what you could potentially get from a jury. Now, to say that that is normal in the American criminal justice system is not to say that I don't have problems with that. We do have problems with overcharging. We do have problems with the use of indictments as instruments of intimidation rather than the quest for justice. But it is...
We got a lot of email responses when I referred to it as a trial penalty instead of a plea enhancement.
Right. Yeah, and it really is the case that these things are used, and they're often used against defendants who are marginalized, who don't have resources, and they're quite scared of what can happen, and will plead out to things that maybe at one end of the spectrum they didn't do, or accept plea deals that, truth be told, were worse than they could have gotten out of this kind of fear and terror of the ultimate punishment. But that's a broader sort of macro look at the justice system. But this dichotomy between a plea deal, which looks pretty good, and an indictment, which looks really scary, is normal in American in American criminal justice. We can talk about the health or not of that normality, but it is normal.
There's one other thing that I wanted to mention because, well, first, it was worth noting that when I was at the Department of Justice, we charged the situation with tax evasion. Y'all may remember the situation from Jersey Shore, the dude with the abs who was like, this is the
They're too
situation.
young to remember that iteration of reality TV.
So he got 8 months in prison for tax evasion, but a lot more charges, yada, yada. Interesting nonetheless.
Madison Cawthorn takes a loaded gun through TSA security, federal charge. He ends up with a $250 fine.
We can point to lots of cases of different
Lots
results.
of cases. Wait, are you saying different cases with different
Other
facts?
cases presenting different allegations and different records may lead to different conclusions, citing Justice Jackson. So one thing that I think gets tossed around a lot, though, is this idea that we have an independent Department of Justice. And it really bothers me because we don't. Even if you're not a huge fan of the unitary executive theory, this idea that the president is the embodiment of the executive branch and anything else in the executive branch derives its power only through that singular office and therefore person, you still have to acknowledge that the Department of Justice is not independent. And a good example of this that I always like to use are gun cases, because you have limited resources and you're deciding where to put them. And that at the end of the day is a political decision. And so you may not think of that as being a partisan question, like an individual prosecution, but, and I'm going to make this like sort of a guns and butter analogy here, but think of it as white collar crime and gun prosecutions as our two axes, like guns and butter. You can only pick one. Again, that's not technically true, but for our purposes. And so broadly speaking, during a Republican administration, you're going to see white collar crime prosecutions go down slightly, and you're going to see gun prosecutions go up slightly. During a Democratic administration, you're going to see the reverse. The gun prosecutions go down and the white collar prosecutions go up. I think it is totally fine wherever you fall on which one of those should get more resources. But when you're talking about whether Hunter Biden was treated the same as Donald Trump, it's a little beside the point, because I think he's getting treated the same as other gun felon possession cases during this administration. And I can have a beef with that, because I think there should be more charging of gun crimes, more enforcement of the gun laws that we have, and frankly, throw the book at people who have illegal guns, because they're the problem more than the people that have legally owned guns. And I'd like to see more of that. So my beef isn't, I don't give up anything about Hunter Biden. Sorry, I just don't. But
other than your general regard for him as a human being.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But this gun thing actually does deeply bother me. You can't keep saying that you want more gun laws on the books and then giving pre-trial diversion to a guy who was illegally possessing a gun. And again, forget Hunter Biden. How about all the other people?
Right. Yeah, and that's actually an interesting irony that they're often that gun crime prosecutions will go down during Democratic administrations that are more concerned about gun control, which is a larger political point that I think is interesting to explore.